Imagine this for a moment. Tomorrow morning, you wake up, and you decide to eat only once that day. No breakfast ritual. No coffee paired with a snack just because it feels right. No lunch break built around food. No evening meal marking the end of the day. Just you, your body, and a stretch of time where your stomach is quiet enough to be noticed. For many people in Canada, that idea alone triggers discomfort. Not physical pain, psychological resistance, because we've been taught something very specific. That hunger is a problem. That it's a warning sign. That if we don't respond quickly, something bad will happen. But here's the uncomfortable truth most of us were never taught. Your body does not experience hunger the way your mind does. In the first hours without food, what you feel is rarely a true energy crisis. It's not your muscles running out of fuel. It's not your brain shutting down. It's your habits being interrupted. Most people don't eat because their bodies urgently need calories. We eat because the clock says it's time, because coworkers are eating, because food has become the punctuation mark of our day. Breakfast to start, lunch to push through, dinner to decompress. But biologically speaking, that rhythm is brand new. For over 99% of human history, eating was not scheduled, it was conditional. You moved first. You searched first. You worked first. Food came later, if it came at all. And your body, this modern body you're living in today, was built for that uncertainty. The first thing that happens when you don't eat isn't weakness. It's noise. Your stomach tightens. Your thoughts drift toward food. A subtle restlessness creeps in. This is not starvation. This is ghrelin, the hunger hormone, doing exactly what it evolved to do. Ghrelin is loud, but it's also impatient. Most people never discover this, because they answer ghrelin immediately. They eat the moment discomfort appears. But when you don't respond right away, something surprising happens. The signal fades, not because your body gave up, but because it reassessed the situation. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. If every missed meal meant death, humans wouldn't exist. Your biology is designed to wait, and when it realizes that food is not immediately available, it shifts strategy. This is where modern nutrition advice gets it wrong. We've been told that skipping meals slows metabolism, burns muscle, and drains energy. But those assumptions are based on short-term snapshots, not on how the body actually adapts. As glucose from recent meals gets used up, insulin begins to fall, and that single shift changes everything. Low insulin tells the body, stop storing, start accessing. Fat is no longer locked away. It becomes available. This is called metabolic switching. And it's not a crash, it's a recalibration. People in Canada who experiment with intermittent fasting often describe this moment in the same way. Not as a spike of energy, but as a quiet stabilization. The bloating fades. The constant need to snack disappears. Energy stops swinging between highs and crashes. What's happening underneath is even more interesting. Your mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside your cells, are adjusting. They are no longer being flooded with sugar. So they switch to fat oxidation. Fat burns slower, cleaner, more predictably. This is why many people report clearer thinking, not jitters. Focus without anxiety. Alertness without tension. This is not your body running on empty. This is your body running efficiently. And then something deeper begins. When energy intake pauses, the body finally has space to do maintenance. This is where autophagy quietly turns on. Autophagy is your cellular recycling system. Damaged proteins, worn-out components, inefficient structures. They don't accumulate forever. They get broken down and rebuilt. This process isn't dramatic. You won't feel it happening. But over time, it changes how the body ages. This is why fasting is now being studied not just for weight loss, but for longevity. But here's the part that matters most, and the part most viral videos skip. This isn't magic, and it's not universal. Some people feel light and clear. Others feel dizzy, irritable, or drained, especially in the beginning. Women may notice hormonal shifts. People under chronic stress may struggle more. Anyone on medication must be cautious. Fasting is not a badge of discipline. It's a biological tool. Used with awareness, it creates space. Used recklessly, it creates strain. The real question isn't, how long can you go without eating? The real question is, can your body trust that food will return? When it can, it adapts. When it can't, it resists. And that distinction changes everything. If fasting were only about food, this conversation would be simple. But it isn't, because the most profound changes don't start in the stomach. They start in the brain. Modern life in Canada is not just overfed, it's overstimulated. From the moment you wake up, your brain is being pulled in multiple directions. Notifications, deadlines, traffic, cold mornings that demand caffeine just to feel human. Food, especially sugar and refined carbohydrates, has quietly become part of how we regulate stress. Not because it nourishes us, but because it stimulates us. Every snack, every sweet coffee, every just a little something between meals triggers dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward. Over time, the brain learns something dangerous. Discomfort equals food. Boredom equals food. Stress equals food. This is not weakness. It's conditioning. When fasting interrupts this pattern, the brain reacts before the body does. In the early stages, many people feel irritable, restless, even emotionally flat. They assume something is wrong. But what's actually happening is neurological recalibration. Dopamine levels are stabilizing. Without constant stimulation from food, the brain temporarily loses its usual shortcuts to pleasure. And for a while, everything feels muted. This phase is uncomfortable and crucial, because once dopamine stops spiking and crashing, something unexpected happens. Clarity appears. Not excitement, not euphoria, but a calm, grounded alertness. Many Canadians describe it the same way. I feel awake without being wired. I'm focused, but not anxious. My thoughts feel quieter. This is not motivation. This is stability. Underneath, fasting is increasing a powerful molecule called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF supports neuroplasticity. It strengthens neural connections. It helps the brain adapt instead of react. Think of it as fertilizer for your neurons. Higher BDNF is associated with better learning, emotional regulation, and resilience to stress. And it rises when insulin stays low and energy becomes consistent. This is why fasting doesn't feel like a rush. It feels like balance. But balance requires honesty. Not everyone's nervous system is starting from the same place. For someone already running on chronic stress, long winters, financial pressure, poor sleep, fasting can initially feel overwhelming. Cortisol may rise. Energy may dip. This doesn't mean fasting is harmful. It means context matters. Fasting is not meant to be layered on top of chaos. It works best when it reduces noise, not when it adds more. This is where many people go wrong. They fast longer. They cut calories harder. They train more aggressively. And the body responds with resistance. Because biologically, stress is stress, whether it comes from work, lack of sleep, or excessive restriction. The goal of fasting is not endurance. It's communication. When the body feels safe, it adapts. When it feels threatened, it protects. This distinction is especially important for women. Female hormones are exquisitely sensitive to energy availability. Extended fasting, especially combined with high stress, can disrupt menstrual cycles and mood. This isn't failure. It's feedback. Which brings us to the most misunderstood part of fasting. It's not about how long you don't eat. It's about how you eat when you do. OMAD, or 1 meal a day, only works when that meal is intentional. Whole foods, adequate protein, healthy fats, minerals, and electrolytes. Without these, fasting becomes deprivation instead of strategy. But when nourishment is present, fasting becomes something else entirely. It becomes space. Space for insulin to fall. Space for inflammation to quiet. Space for the nervous system to downshift. And over time, Something subtle but profound changes. Hunger stops feeling urgent. Cravings lose their emotional grip. You stop negotiating with food. Not because you're controlling yourself, but because your biology is no longer panicking. This is metabolic trust. And trust changes behavior without force. People often say, "I didn't plan to eat less, it just happened. I stopped thinking about food all day. I feel more in control," without trying. This is not discipline. It's alignment. But there is one final layer, and it's the one most people never connect: longevity. When digestion quiets down, repair speeds up. Cells prioritize maintenance. Mitochondria become more efficient. Oxidative stress decreases. Aging doesn't stop, but it slows. This isn't about living forever. It's about staying functional longer, clear-minded, energetic, resilient. And this is why fasting has existed across cultures for thousands of years. Not as punishment, not as optimization, but as rhythm. Periods of intake, periods of absence. Modern life erased that rhythm. Fasting brings it back, not as a trend, but as a memory. At some point, usually without warning, the conversation about fasting stops being about food. It becomes personal. People often expect a dramatic moment, a breakthrough, a sudden surge of discipline or confidence. But what actually happens is quieter. You realize one morning that hunger no longer controls your mood, that missing a meal doesn't feel like an emergency, that your energy doesn't collapse when routines change. And that realization lands deeper than any diet ever did. Because for most of our lives, we've been negotiating with discomfort, eating to silence it, snacking to distract from it, fueling constantly not because we need to, but because we're uncomfortable with absence. Fasting gently exposes that pattern, not to punish you, but to reveal it. And once you see it, something fundamental shifts. You stop asking, "How do I control myself around food?" And you start asking, "Why did food have so much control in the first place?" This is where fasting quietly changes identity. Not because you eat less, but because you trust yourself more. When hunger appears and you don't immediately react, you build a new relationship with your body, one based on listening instead of fear, on response instead of reflex. This is why so many people describe their first successful fast not as a physical achievement, but as a psychological one. They didn't push through. They didn't fight. They allowed a signal to rise and pass. That experience rewires something deep. It teaches your nervous system that absence is not danger. That discomfort is information, not command. That your body is capable of adapting without panic. And once that trust is established, it spreads. Food becomes simpler. Choices feel lighter. You stop micromanaging every decision, not because you're stricter, but because the urgency is gone. This is what real metabolic flexibility feels like. Not a protocol, not a challenge, but freedom of response. You can eat when food is available. You can wait when it isn't. You can travel, skip meals, change schedules, and your body doesn't fall apart. That adaptability is the opposite of fragility. And fragility is what most modern health advice accidentally creates. Eat every few hours or crash. Miss breakfast and suffer. Skip a snack and lose focus. Those beliefs train dependency. Fasting, when done thoughtfully, trains resilience. But this is where responsibility matters. Because fasting is not something you prove. It's something you integrate. There is no prize for suffering, no virtue in extremes. The body doesn't reward punishment. It rewards rhythm. Periods of nourishment. Periods of rest. Periods of absence. Periods of repair. When that rhythm returns, health stops feeling like work. It feels like cooperation. And this is why the longest-lasting benefit of fasting isn't weight loss or mental clarity. It's agency. You stop outsourcing your well-being to constant input. You stop chasing stability through stimulation. You stop fearing hunger like a malfunction. Instead, you recognize it as a signal, one that can be acknowledged without immediate action. This doesn't mean you ignore your body. It means you finally understand it. And understanding replaces control. That's why this isn't a call to eat once a day, or to fast longer, or to follow a rigid schedule. It's an invitation to experiment with respect, to notice how your body responds when you create space, to see what happens when digestion pauses, when insulin drops, when the nervous system has a moment to breathe. For some, that space is 12 hours. For others, 16. For some, one meal a day works. For others, it doesn't. There is no universal rule, only feedback. And that feedback becomes clearer when the noise of constant eating quiets down. This is where the deeper insight lives. Modern life has convinced us that health comes from doing more, eating more often, optimizing more variables, tracking more data. But biology often moves in the opposite direction. Sometimes health comes from removal, from pauses, from letting systems rest long enough to remember how to function on their own. Fasting is not about deprivation. It's about contrast. And contrast is how biology learns. Light and dark, stress and recovery, feeding and fasting. When everything is constant, signals blur. When contrast returns, clarity follows. So if there's one thing to take from this, let it be this. Your body is not fragile. It is adaptive. It remembers rhythms older than any modern routine. And when you give it space, real space, it doesn't collapse. It recalibrates. If this perspective made you rethink hunger, even slightly, that's the beginning. If it raised questions instead of giving rules, that's intentional. Because the goal isn't to follow a method, it's to reclaim dialogue with your own biology. If you're curious, skeptical, or experimenting, share your experience. If you've tried fasting and struggled, that matters. If it helped you feel more grounded, that matters too. This channel isn't about extremes. It's about understanding. And once you understand how your body actually works, the need for constant control fades. What replaces it is something quieter: confidence, resilience, and a sense that your body is finally working with you, not against you.